I am not here to convince you of anything. I am simply telling you what I saw in the suffocating silence of the Nevada desert, in a place that officially has no name and a history that has been scrubbed from the record of human existence. What you do with this truth is your burden to carry. But before I describe the technology that defies physics or the screaming silence of the testing chambers, you need to understand how a man like me, a soldier who believed in the tangible, the solid, and the rational, came to see the edges of the universe fray and dissolve. My name is Mason Hale. For 18 years, I was a ghost in the machinery of the United States Army Special Forces. I have walked through shadows on 4 continents, conducting operations in countries I am forbidden to name, doing things that still wake me in a cold sweat. I was never a conspiracy theorist. I was a career soldier who viewed secrets as boring administrative nonsense or the necessary grit of warfare that changed on a quiet morning when I was pulled from a training exercise at Fort Bragg. My commanding officer didn't look me in the eye. He simply told me that someone from Special Projects wanted to speak with me. The interview took place in a room so generic it felt like a hallucination. There were no windows, only the hum of an air conditioner and a man who called himself Mr. Graves. He didn't ask about my marksmanship or my tactical record. He asked about my soul. How do you process information that contradicts your understanding of reality, he asked. I told him I adjusted based on evidence. What if the evidence suggests technology that shouldn't exist? I told him the models were simply incomplete. He liked that. He asked if I could keep a secret that challenged the very definition of what is possible. I said yes, because that is what soldiers do. We follow orders. We don't look up. 3 weeks later, I was on an unmarked plane flying into the heart of the desert. When we landed at Groom Lake, the base the world calls Area 51, I thought I was guarding a new stealth bomber. I was wrong. I was assigned to Security Team Echo, responsible for Silo 7. It wasn't a silo in the traditional sense. It was a wound in the earth, a reinforced shaft descending 300 feet into the ancient rock. The air down there was different, heavy, metallic, and unnervingly still. My team leader was a man named Travis Concade, a ranger who had been at the facility for 22 years. He had the eyes of a man who had stared into the sun for too long and finally stopped blinking. "What you're about to guard isn't aircraft," he whispered during my first briefing. "It isn't weapons. The rules here are different. You don't ask questions, and you never, under any circumstances, enter the chamber without protocol." The heart of Silo 7 was a testing chamber the size of a cathedral, lined with light-absorbing composite. In its center sat the artifact. It was a sphere, 12 feet across, covered in geometric patterns that seemed to shift whenever you tried to focus on them. It had no power source, no welds, no marks of human hands. It had been pulled from the Earth decades ago, and we still didn't know what it was. We only knew that it was waiting. Then came the activations. It started as a low-frequency hum, a vibration you felt in your marrow more than your ears. Then, the air would ripple like a heat shimmer, but the temperature would plummet. During my first week, I watched a scientist, Dr. Elias Ward, get caught in the radius. He froze mid-step, his body a statue, but his eyes were moving with a primal, liquid terror. When the distortion pulsed and he finally collapsed, he was no longer the man who had walked in. He spoke in fragments of doors opening everywhere, and things in the spaces between spaces. He looked at us like we were children playing with matches in a room full of gasoline. Over the next few months, I witnessed 17 more events. The facility called them random, but I began to see the pattern. We weren't just watching the artifact, we were poking it. Every time we ran high-frequency experiments in the adjacent silos, the artifact woke up. It wasn't a relic, it was a beacon. And we were screaming into the void, begging for something to notice us. A physicist named Logan Voss confirmed my fears. He began leaving me notes, desperate fragments of data. He told me the signals the artifact emitted matched nothing in nature, but echoed signals detected from deep space places where physics shouldn't allow life to exist. His final note, left on my locker before he was transferred into non-existence, told me to stand in the northeast corner of the chamber during the Friday activation. At 03,000 hours, I broke every protocol I had sworn to uphold. I stood outside the safe zone and watched. When the hum reached its crescendo, the distortion didn't just ripple, it tore. For 7 seconds, the air became a window. I saw architecture that defied gravity, vast structures built of light and shadow that folded into themselves in dimensions my brain screamed to reject. And in those spaces, I saw them. Not flesh and blood, but presence, intelligence without form, awareness as vast as the stars. They looked back. I felt their attention focus on me, a weight so cosmic it nearly crushed my lungs. They saw us. They saw the little monkeys in the desert trying to force open a gate they weren't meant to touch. I fell to my knees, blood leaking from my nose, my heart hammered against my ribs like a trapped bird. When I recovered, everything had changed. I realized the Gatekeeper Project wasn't about research. It was about fear. My superiors were terrified that if they didn't weaponize this gateway, someone else would. They were willing to sacrifice the sanity of their best minds to find a way to control the infinite. I tried to speak to an outsider, a colonel named Sarah Mackenzie. She believed me. She told me we were feeding the artifact, teaching it how to interface with our world. She died in a car accident 3 weeks later. That was the moment I knew I was alone. The facility began accelerating the tests. The activations became daily, the breaches wider. The air in Silo 7 began to smell of ozone and something ancient. Another researcher, Dr. Vasquez, went mad, or perhaps she was the only one who became sane. The frequency is stabilizing, she told me before they dragged her away. They've learned our parameters. The gate won't close next time. In October, the final warning came. A massive activation triggered a facility-wide evacuation. The distortion filled the chamber. I saw the entities again, closer now, pressing against the veil of our reality. They weren't invading, they were arriving. Like a tide that cannot be stopped by a sandcastle, they were simply flowing toward the opening we had spent 70 years widening. I realized then that the artifacts were planted. They were seeds, meant for communication, meant for a bridge. But we had treated them as locks to be picked and secrets to be stolen. We had spent decades knocking on a door, and now that someone was answering, we were terrified. I stole the data. I took the hard drives and the names of the dead, and I walked into the desert. I've been running ever since, moving from town to town, watching the news for the shimmer in the sky that I know is coming. The government will tell you it's a weather phenomenon or a foreign threat. They will lie because they have to. They will try to fight the infinite with lead and fire, and they will fail. The gates are open. The entities are crossing over. We have spent 70 years in a dark room, trying to turn the light switch into a weapon. Now, the light is coming on, and we're about to find out if we can handle the sight of what has been standing in the room with us all along. My name is Mason Hale, and I am the man who saw the end of the world as we knew it. I only hope that when they finally step through, we have enough humanity left to offer a hand instead of a trigger pull. But as a soldier who saw what happened in Silo 7, I know we are not ready. The door is wide open, and the silence is finally over.